Hello, and welcome to SG Squared. Steve Gladen, Global Small Groups Pastor at Saddleback Church, pulls from his 20-plus years of small group ministry experience to encourage and equip listeners to lead more effective small group ministry. Sit back, learn, and enjoy SG Squared with Steve Gladen.
Welcome to SG Squared, Steve Gladen on small groups. Hey everyone, this is Derek. Thank you for joining us today, and I am joined by your main host, the man whose very initials stand for small groups, Steve Gladen. Steve, how are you doing, man?
It's a beautiful summertime as we are recording this show. Just loving, and our summer times are in those 80s, sometimes creep up to the 90s. But we love summer. I know the nation is baking right now, and pretty much the world is. So, but just stay in your house till November 1st, all those people that are in the bake zone.
You're living large there in SoCal. The June gloom is gone, and it's beach time, baby. How many days a week do you get down to the beach and just relax?
At least once every other year in reality. I guess only on vacations. Only on vacations or whenever we have visitors like Derek who come down and say, gotta go to the beach. So, try and stay. The sandy's too dusty and all that. So, I prefer the pool. The pool's right out the back door, so much easier.
I love it. I cannot believe we are already in the thick of summer. And we've got a very exciting special guest on this show today, Steve. So why don't you give our listeners a little preview of what's to come?
Yeah, let me tee this up, and then I'll let Derek, take this one over. But a buddy of mine, Matt Hamilton, is going to be on the show. Derek is going to give you a little of that intro, his little bit of his bio and what he does and all that. And we'll dive into the show. But the last number of episodes, if you guys have been followers, with us on every episode that we have, the last number, we have been way out of our lane and talking about crazy things like UX, where we had Christina Dawson as a guest, and we talked about UX, or the user experience. How does that impact ministry of where it's at? Had a buddy of mine, Dave Arnold, who was on the show for the last episode too, and we talked about follow-up and how data can help you actually follow up. And as you start to learn, there's so many things that are happening out there in the corporate world that Christianity should dive into and just take pages out of their playbook, because they have spent billions of dollars trying to figure out how humanity will buy their products, and let's just steal what they've got, because all they really did is take Jesus' principles and work them, and the church hasn't been doing it. And in this episode, no different, man. We're going to talk to you about 7 ways CRM can improve your discipleship. And some of you are like, well, I don't even know what those letters stand for. I don't know what's happening here. The show's off the rails. We really talk about Jesus, the last couple of episodes, but we'll get into that. But the thing I want to let you know is that Matt is an expert in CRM. He's also a follower of Christ, which is more important. But Derek, why don't you tee up who our guest is, and then I'm going to take us to that next level.
Yeah, it's been fun having some special guests on the last few times, Steve. It brings a little bit of spice to our show. I don't know if people get tired of you and me sometimes. So it's great to have these fresh faces, these fresh voices. And I think this is the third one in a row with a special guest. So Matt, we're so honored to have you. And again, as Steve said, you're going to walk us through 7 ways CRM can improve discipleship. But I was blown away looking at your bio here, just the little bullet points. Matt, you've got 35 years of tech sales experience. Wow. And
he looks like he's 35, but he's not.
Right.
Yeah, it started back in the 1800s with punch cards, so that's how long I've been around. It's very sad when you say that out loud. So I'll start by saying thanks, Derek. I appreciate it, and Steve for the intro. It's great privilege to hang out with you guys today. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Derek, but I had to get a shot in early in the show.
I love it. No, it looks like you've got 2 million plus air miles to over 15 countries and 30 states. Can you tell us just a little bit more about some of these global companies you've worked for, and some of the stuff you've done to get our listeners super pumped up that they should listen to you all the way through this episode?
Sure. Well, I'll take the shine off of one thing Steve said. So expert, I don't know that I would put myself in the expert box in anything. So let me bring that expectation back a little bit. But what I will say is practitioner, definitely. For those of you don't know Steve and I's relationship, we go back over 20 years, close friends, family friends. To Derek's specific question, so I grew up in tech sales. I got in tech sales while I was still in college. And that was many moons ago, as I was kidding, but serious about the number of years, and grew up in it. I've worked for a variety of different hardware, software companies, service companies, during that 3.5 decades in the business. And one of the things you learn about, obviously, it's a bit ironic, but an awful lot of tech firms, believe it or not, don't use some of the tech. They're not some of the best practitioners of the tech. So that's why I say we're all practitioners together, because we're all learning and figuring out, hey, how can we do this thing better? And the thing is really just staying relevant and advancing your agenda, whether that's a product, a service, or in this case, eternal outcomes and the foundation for small groups. So that's a bit about me. Again, I've seen a lot of things and have been part of, spent the majority of my career anchored in the United States, but flown all over the place. So I've seen startups, I've seen challenges with new countries and new regions, organizing that. I've seen teams in despair. So, have been the benefactor of some companies that were not in good stead, that maybe a company I was associated with was acquiring. And so we had to turn around. So I just share that with the listeners to say, I've seen a lot, and they come in all shapes and sizes, from startup build to fix to operate, run to accelerate into high growth.
Yeah, Matt has been both friend, mentor, and one of the things that we always giggle about is that when we're talking about our two worlds, that we will say we operate and sell the most different products on the planet. He's selling high tech. We're selling Jesus. Actually, we don't sell, we give away. But we talk about how our two organizations, our two worlds are so similar. And I learned from him. Hopefully he learns from me. And it's been really good. So I'm super excited to dive in, because these 7 things that we're going to talk to you about are going to be super important, because CRM can help you in these 7 ways will impact the way you do discipleship. And because when you use CRM, it helps you become scalable. And when you're scalable, then you can reach more people for Jesus. But Matt, before we go too far down this show, CRM, a word that, we bounce around and we throw around. Well, what is CRM, and how would you help unpack that for our listeners?
Yeah, CRM is client resource management, right? So what it is essentially saying, which again, that may be Greek speak to many of our listeners out there, it's essentially, what's relevant to your customer base. It helps you organize who you're speaking to and with, so that you can traverse, days, weeks, months, and even sometimes years, and not lose the information that you've garnered along the way. You also capture and input nuggets of, I'll say, great information into the CRM. So it becomes a central repository of who you're speaking and engaging with, and it allows you to share that information as narrowly or broadly as you want, right? And so that helps you, like I'll make it a team sport analogy. It helps you communicate on the court much better, right? It helps you just move the ball faster, more efficiently. And the biggest thing is, for the recipient, they feel connected with you. And that's really what that's the underpinning. So I'll say the time I wanted to spend with this group today and our listeners is that connectedness is so important. And I know you guys know that, but sometimes we don't make that leap or that jump to say, how can technology help me with that? CRM it's not the only thing, but it is a foundational piece that will help all of us. As we try
and you bring apart a good thing, because I think most of our listeners would understand that the life expectancy of a small group pastor can be in the short years. I've been at Saddleback, moving on my 26th year, and that's just an anomaly. That's just not normal. But what can happen for those of you, what the best thing you can do for your church is help them not lose the institutional knowledge that you're gaining as you're working with people. So that's why these 7 things are going to be so important, because, there will be a day when I'm gone. And I want to make sure all the institutional knowledge of all of our groups and all of our training and everything is still in place, that is easily accessible and not lost because I've departed or because any one of our listeners have departed. So there's some good things there. So without any further ado, let's start to jump into these 7 ways. Derek will have everything posted in the show notes so you can follow along a little bit later. But for right now, listen up and enjoy. So, Matt, number 1, you're going to talk about high-level perspective. And so when you're talking about, this first way, can you give us some of the bullet points of what you're meaning by high-level perspective of what you're setting up here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. I like to say, and again, coming from a sales guy, so you would expect nothing less, right? We're all in sales, right? And sometimes, boy, that makes people cringe. It might be right up there with lawyer, right? I mean, that's all your verbiage slammed together, and you want to run out the door. Sorry, I've offended 2 group sales guys and lawyers now, so I'm doing well early in the podcast.
You're talking to pastors, so you're safe.
Totally, yeah, exactly. Thank you. I'll rely on that. But what I'm saying there is, we're all trying to get a message across. We're all trying to stoke the coals on something, right? And again, whether that's a need for a product or solution, or in this case, small groups, right? What is the thing? Like, what are we trying to get across? So sales, and I would submit that really any people interaction, it starts with a state of mind. Like, I think you need to kind of get your mental state right as you go into this and say, I need a high level perspective. Before I start reaching out and communicating, let me get myself right. Obviously, open up in prayer, get oriented on what you're trying to accomplish that day, but then get into the headspace of the small group leaders and community that you're reaching into. What do I need to do there? What are the points I'm trying to get across? And for me, the way that I explain it to younger sellers and people that are coming in my business in the secular world is you have to have a clear vision, right? Don't make people guess why you're reaching out, right? If we all love to talk, nobody more so than yours truly, but you have to adjust and gauge who's on the other end of that communication. And so starting off with a clear, hey, here's who I am, here's why I'm here, if we haven't spoken before, or pick up where you last left off. And that anchors back to the CRM bits we'll get into in a minute. That makes it really relevant. And that experience on the other side, I'll say the recipient of our outreach, is in a much better headspace as well, too. While you can't control their headspace, you've put yourself in a position and you're starting on the right foot, you're being concise, and you're jumping right in. And they get that, and they'll appreciate that, because that says, I respect you, I respect your time. And we may end up talking for 2 hours, but we know how we got into this, and it was a mutual, I'll say, agreement. As the conversation went, we could unpack things. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. The beautiful thing too is that, when we read through the Bible, when you read through Acts 2:42 through 47, we understand how community can help set up that overall perspective of where we want to take people and the vision that we want to give them. And I love what you were saying right there is that, we want to think of from the person you're talking to, just, what are they going through? What are they trying to learn? And then where are we trying to take them and make with that? So it's a beautiful piece of what you're saying. So anything else on the high level perspective that you're wanting to dial in?
Yeah, it's, I kind of jokingly put in there, but everybody's favorite subject is themselves, right? And that's a little bit funny, but it's a little bit true. So as you're, and again, let's take 2 examples of this. There's the, hey, I've never met you before, I've never spoken to you before. So clearly your base of information, you're starting at ground zero. But be respectfully interviewing, right, in that process. What's on their mind, right? Where, again, you have an agenda that you're perhaps trying to drive. Maybe I'll use an example to make this easier. There's a small group conference that Steve Gladen's holding, and you want to get all of your leaders to that, right? So that's an opening up of, hey, have you attended one of these before? Have you attended others before? What'd you like about them? What did you not like about them? Draw some of that out, and that's really going to personalize it for them. It shows that you care. That connection is a really big deal. That care element, it will convert to credibility down the line. right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, hey, I need you there, because, I'm just trying to get 20 people there, or I'm trying to get 200 people there, or whatever that objective is. Again, that it starts with getting your head in the right space and then being engaging on a personal note. And you got to capture, I'll keep harping on this throughout the podcast, but you got to capture what you're learning, right? Don't lose those nuggets, because they're so transferable, and they enrich the engagement every single time.
Yeah, keeping good notes and keeping that around, and again, just taking it from beyond themselves to what it's all about, and it's answering the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing community? Why are we doing groups? And how's that important? How's that lead towards discipleship? Derek?
Love it. Number 1 was on fire. Let's jump to number 2 as we go on this journey of 7 ways CRM can improve discipleship. And in number 2 here, Matt, you talk about personalized service. And I love how you state that our world demands real-time interaction with deep personalization. Can you unpack that for us and give us everything you've got on personalized service?
Yeah, there's an underpinning there, Derek, and thanks for that setup, which is expectations, right? Whether we love it or not, our world has been thrust with, these unbelievable phones that do everything for us. Our whole lives are on them, from, travel to connection. I think communication might be at the bottom end of it, right? But I mean, it's the whole reason it was invented to begin with. But our whole world is on that. And what I mean through that is that the expectation for knowing what I want to know, or getting an answer, or getting a reaction, is almost instantaneous, right? Again, back when I was a much younger man, it was not only normal but acceptable behavior that you wouldn't hear feedback for something for a week, or heaven forbid, a month. Like that, those days are gone, right? I mean, that's like riding a horse to work, right? I mean, that is not the world that we live in. So, it's important to understand this expectation, because that's who's on the other end of the wire, whether they say that to you or not. Their expectation is that you're going to have rapid response and almost real-time engagement with them. So it's also important, if you can't fit into that box, that you're communicating that proactively. Like, don't let them figure that out. So that's a big thing. So it's if you're in alignment with the expectation, you're going to by and large be okay. If you're leaving that to chance and you don't set those expectations, that is going to lead to probably disenchantment on my experience that I have personally. And again, that's also going to go, to the expectation that they've learned through the world, right? Everything else that's feeding them, Lord knows advertisements, if somebody wants to sell you something online, right? I mean, all those recommendations are coming at you in a matter of seconds, if that. And we've all become normalized to that. So that's the personalized service a bit, right? And again, it is, you could draw from this, if any of you out there, because I know I'm the only one that online shops, but you look at something once and, my goodness, like you're being solicited by that ad for the next 20 days, maybe 2 months, something like that. I'm not advocating that we in the church and small group community become stalkers, but what I am saying is there are elements and nuggets there that we can pack away and open up with a warmer next engagement, right? And that's the personalization of service.
So Matt, before we jump in and close this one up, when you're talking about personalized service, I know many times in the church world, obviously, we don't have a budget to have AI that can help us do everything that Amazon or other or online services are doing. But when you're talking about personalized service, do you find a difference between there is the automatic email that hits people? Would you qualify that as personalized service, or are you talking about just the importance of, if someone says, "I want to be in a group," or "I want to start a group"? Getting it back in touch with them, not just by an email, but maybe calling them up or engaging with them somehow within a certain period of time?
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve. I think you have to. There's not one answer to that, and there isn't one path. I think you have to think about paths, and I think that it's important for everybody in the small group community to think about that in terms of, there's almost, I'm going to call it bulletin board or newsletter style. That can be kind of a, hey, here's what's going on. And, like, hey, here's announcements and events and those sorts of things. And I can expect to see that. And as a leader, I can set up that expectation that I will deliver this on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, maybe a quarterly basis, and I'll get certain bits of information there. But when somebody reaches out to kind of the other part of your example, Steve, you're like, hey, I want to join a small group. Maybe it took me 6 months or a year's worth of courage. I've been going to church and hearing about small groups, and man, this is a big thing for me. We always have to think, right, toward the more, and get our mindsets back to the mindset to the most vulnerable, the most tentative in the group, and say, how would you feel if it took you 6 months worth of courage or a year's worth of courage to reach out to somebody and say, I want to join a small group, and you don't hear from somebody for weeks? Like that's, and again, we're using that as an example of, okay, here's how we don't do it. But that's what we have to set up. And again, if we can proactively message that, both sides, hey, when we're saying, hey guys, if you're not in a small group, get out there, reach out, because of, I'll make it up, but, because of our volume and whatnot, it may take a week. So bear with us. We'll get to you. That also helps. The expectation bit is, like I said, a common thread through the tapestry. The more you can communicate expectations, the more, I'll say, gray matter that you take out of it, and the less miscommunication that you'll have down the way. Makes sense?
That makes perfect sense. Let's go to number 3. This brings out my junior high humor here, a central repository. So I'm going to move past all that and my junior high humor of information, accessible and shareable. Derek, I'm happy to give you a central repository, but I'll back off from that comment. But I actually love where this point is going. My sick humor aside, Matt, talk to us about this information, because this is a big area where institutional knowledge on a person who can give us the most intimate information of prayer requests and things that they want. It's super important for us to understand this.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I mean, this is, we'll stick with your, junior high, middle school analogy there, right? This is, we'll call this your permanent record, right? So it's going down on your permanent record, and riff on that. What we're saying is, look, when we're having these engagements, and again, it can be any level of it, right? It can be phone, email, text. It could be the meeting we had tonight. It could be just we bumped into each other at coffee. All of this is included. Anything that we're picking up that is important to the individual that we can get into the CRM. And the CRM is essentially the central repository, the permanent record, right? So one, it's electronic. That means, lots of things, right? We in today's day and age, we can access it from anywhere. It's typically resilient. So if I lose my phone, we didn't lose all your records. Somebody else can dial that up. Yeah. 3, it's shareable, right? We can get that moving any which way we want. We can slice it, dice it, and so that we're, again, tailoring and personalizing the service to reach the appropriate messages and the appropriate level of help and care and development, all those things to the audience. I think the thing that we've all probably been through this, we've called in for customer service on something, and you go through a battery of 20 questions on security questions, and you get to your mom's maiden name, and then you just about get the help, and then you get transferred to the next person, and then they start all over again with what's your mom's maiden name, and we go down this thing. That can become us if we're not organized and look at our notes and look at the footsteps and fingerprints that have been laid down in previous meetings and conversations. So that becomes a really terrible, I'll say, end user experience, right? If I have somebody going down that same path, a leader calls me and walks me through the same questions that I answered 6 months ago or last year. It just means, do you guys really care? Are you really communicating effectively with me? Or is this just purely a numbers game? Or are we really in this for the right reasons? Right. And my headspace can go in a lot of directions that are, I'll say, overstated or overhyped, but they're not good places. And they're very avoidable because we go back to the central database, which the CRM is essentially filling in. And it's saying, look, we're only going to capture the things that you'll share with us, what's important to you, where you want to take your group, where you could use help. where you've tried and, maybe we got some good feedback, right? We're talking about improvement points, but certainly there's a lot of space in there too, where you could say, my gosh, we just had this conference and it was fantastic. Here's some of the feedback that we got from this person or this group, et cetera. That's super important to know too, right? We can take a lot of that into the next conference. We can, do so many things with that, but that's why the central repository is so critical.
So no matter whether it's, you brought up another good point, that events, most of us will do events at our church, and then we'll go through what do we do? We'll do a full helpful list, and we'll try to figure out how we can improve on. So next year when it comes, we'll do better. But that's one area. The other area I'm hearing you also talk about, though, is also with our group leaders, knowing good information on them so that if they give us a prayer request, we pick back up right where it was and ask them about it and what did God do, or whether it's our coaches or community leaders, wherever we're at in that system, you're trying to make sure that the people God has given you, you've got to have a good database system that you can access and store information that's a little bit more than just their name and their address and maybe where the group is at. But as you collect data points, you want to take it much deeper.
That's exactly right, Steve. And one note that I make in here, and I'd be remiss if we didn't touch on it really quickly, which is you need to be thoughtful. So the tool doesn't so much matter, right? There's lots of different CRM tools out there, even CRM-like things, really for any budget. So, some of them are very expensive, right? And you can swing to that. And most of us don't have the resources from a church perspective to lay that down as we would in a secular or business world. But it's not so much the tool. It is the thoughtfulness behind the information that you're gathering. So this is another bit that we have to strike a fine balance in. You need to get enough information to be helpful, useful, and transferable. So when we're sharing between different people, coaches within the church, that we look like we're communicating, because we are. But you also can't play, as I lovingly refer to as professional 2-year-old. You just can't sit there and ask endless questions, why, in perpetuity. And because as you're getting answers to that, you need to, if you're being effective, you need to get that back into the CRM and create data fields. So you want to strike a fine balance of, hey, what are the things that are absolutely essential for us to be good communicators and caregivers? What are the things that are maybe at second degree, okay, nice to have, but not completely essential? And then there's maybe a peripheral that's just almost notes and, okay, these are definitely not required, fields, if you will, or data points, but we can add to that. And the art here is, as a wise man once said, take a lot of time to write a short letter. That's the same exercise here. Like, take a lot of thoughtfulness to gather and categorize those 3 buckets. It will serve you down the road, because you can also choke yourself out by swimming in information. You're exhausting the people you're talking to, and the database becomes so full of less than important information that it's hard to make anything of it. And so that's a cautionary tale.
Yeah, like I called this person yesterday, but there's no other useful information with it.
Correct. That's exactly right. And that's kind of a final point on that too, is that's the beauty of a CRM. If you're using it appropriately, you're getting time date stamps so that, when you do an entry, it's going to leave the fingerprints of when that person was even attempted. Like, you may not even have reached them, but if you log your calls and your outreach into the CRM, you'll see that. And that also gives you an indication of, maybe I'm calling at the wrong time. Maybe I'm using the wrong medium. Maybe I'm doing it all right, but you'll be able to see those patterns over time. And that's why you're centralizing as well too. You want to observe that so that you can become more effective and efficient at the same time. It's not one in exchange of the other, it's both. And that's kind of the beauty of it.
Yep. Good information. Man, Matt, thanks so much for being here and sharing all of this knowledge. When it comes to ways that CRM can improve discipleship, talk to us a little bit about data insights and how the ability to spot trends is key.
Yeah, it's really an iterative process. So let me start there, because like these 2 points that we're on, it's kind of really meld well together. If you're really thoughtful about the layout of what's important, then you can be more efficient. And again, nothing wrong with a 3-hour conversation if everybody's into it, but you could also have a 3-minute conversation and be highly effective and get the people what they need. And you're also updated on your side. Over time, an awful lot of, I'll say what we've done, what I've been blessed with in my sales capacity is I call it science experiments, right? We try, we'll have an objective. Hey, we want to sell more. We want to penetrate a customer base. We want to enter a new region. How do we do that? We go back to the CRM for that data, right? The data is the guiding principles. We don't create a narrative and then try to use the data to prop it up. We go to the data to tell us if that's what's happening. Like, hey, we feel like there's a market here. Well, why do we feel that way? Do we have outreach from people in that area? Or do we have notes in there that are telling us that, that would be attractive to people, or the reason they choose us as a product or a solution? And the same is true, right? It's hey, when we all seen it. If you've been part of any church gathering or movement, you're like, man, we're cracking. When we do it at this campus, it's jamming. Or if we do this format, if we do a podcast with Steve Gladen, man, it burns down the house. Our ratings are up there because it's just good stuff. You'll see that, and the data will come alive to you over time. But it requires thoughtful gathering and consistent gathering. So I'll make up a small example. If you have 20 people doing input into the CRM, but everybody's kind of doing their own thing, and the fields are haphazard, so your layout isn't solid and your execution isn't solid from your user, you're really just going to get a ball of yarn, right? It's not going to be anything that's usable. So discipline around that, and that's where I think a lot of team energy has to come together to go, hey guys, we know what we're doing here, we think, but there's some things we maybe need to experiment with. How do we do that? What are the data points that we want to get into and start looking at that? And then the data will start to come alive before you as you look at those touches and frequency, and it really will write the story. It's what we found.
As I'm just thinking real time in small group ministry, some of the data things that we've been able to look at that have helped us, kind of like when we're doing a gathering, knowing which nights of the week your groups meet. That's a good data thing, because if they all meet on Thursday, that's a good gathering night that you could have, a central groups gathering and pull in with all those people. Also, for those of you that are using streaming services in your curriculum, if you're seeing what curriculum they're using or which curriculum they aren't using, that's just as important too for you. The same thing with your leader training. You can see how many people are coming to physical leader training or how many are watching it online. And if they're watching it online, what degree are they watching it? So there's there's many things data can help you with. But the other thing I would want to encourage you with as you're listening to this podcast and you're like going, man, when Matt said, I don't want to speak Greek to you, but it's feeling like Greek. There are people in your congregation too that work in sales, and they work with all their CRM in a way that can help you out. And so I just want to encourage you, if this is hard information for you, or if it's confusing, or you're like, man, I'm only through point 4 and it's killing me, I want to encourage you, don't lose this, because so much information people are giving you and telling you. It's kind of like in your church world, if one of your services is overflowing, they're telling you, this is the time I like. It's a data point for you. There's many things in the small group world that are just as much data points I want you to encourage to keep looking after. Anything else, guys?
I was going to say, I think you nailed it, Steve, on that. It's, I put in the notes, for the viewers, if they're listening, that this is a competitive advantage. And again, I'm going to kind of, I'm going to keep a light thread in this world of a little bit of a business, right? I know this is church, and I don't want to commingle those things or create any discomfort there. But when you're organized, people gravitate to structure. They never, and here's the funny part: they never ask for it, but you can feel structure. It doesn't need to be super rigid. I'm not saying inflexible. I'm just saying a little bit of structure. Structure is consistency. Structure is care. Structure comes across as organized and efficient. And effective, and essentially, if you're caring for people, and again, we're on the podcast today talking about community and small groups, like what could be more in that vein. That is a big difference. And let me put it to you differently, like incentive. People spend their time where they're being fulfilled, and sometimes it's pushed. Like that's not just somebody that's praising them all the time. That's somebody that's helping them get to the next level, accomplish the next goal. I've seen that for decades. And again, it's unasked for. So sometimes, right, that structure is the thing that's going to get you through. And I just, I encourage you, I guess is maybe the way I'd end this point, is I just encourage you to have just enough. You just need just enough to help advance and come across with the customer experience that you're looking for.
Now, bringing it all back to discipleship, remember that, the reason why discipleship is so critical, people have a spiritual void and they're looking to fill it. And this is one way that you're able to use technology and use a CRM to help you. So just joining the show, we're with Matt Hamilton. We're talking about 7 ways CRM can help you in discipleship. We talked about high-level perspective, number 1, personalized service, number 2, the central repository of information, so it's accessible, shareable, and you don't lose the institutional knowledge. There's insights that you can get from the data that people are going with you. And number 5 we want to talk about is time is our most precious commodity. Now, we talk a lot about this, Matt, setting it up, just saying, everyone's got 168 hours, and if the church meets the needs, people give the time. And two legs the church stands on outside the weekend services is helping people get in relationships, which is what Derek and I and the Small Group Network are all about, and getting them a responsibility. And their byproducts that they feel is, their spiritual void is filled when they find a relationship that connects them vertically and horizontally. And that's why we're trying, that's what we call that as discipleship. And relationally, if you have a responsibility that matches your giftedness, then you feel value and you give the time. And Matt, you're a prime example of this. You give your time, all over the place for the kingdom work because it gives you value with that. So unpack time is our most precious commodity now that I've contaminated the Petri dish.
No, not at all. Great setup. Look, this is one of those things that is, I'm going to use another unpopular word in today's world, which is discipline. And so if you insert a little discipline into your time management, it is so fulfilling because your accomplishment, your days and your weeks will flow better. Like I can promise you this. I do a goal setting exercise with everybody that works for me, and again, it's not public shaming, right? I want to be clear here. I'm not that mean of a person, but you have to understand what you're trying to do. And then you need to bring that down into building blocks, which ultimately end up in tasks, right? It gets very tactical, and those tactics need to get scheduled. Like this is the tie-in, right? So we talked about the data points, and we talked about, hey, let's get all the central repository, and this data is talking to us. But then it's like, okay, but if I stop there, I'm smarter, but I'm not more effective, right? What this section of it is okay, take the rubber to the road. What am I going to do? And in the notes, you'll see I think there's a couple big takeaways in here. One, we have a world that's communicating in many more ways. Like if I get another app to communicate with me, I don't know what. Steve's going to say it's a special prayer for me, right? I mean, we've got Messenger and WhatsApp and Slack and email and kind of like it's just out it's out our ears right now. But the point I'm making in the notes is when you're engaging with the folks you're trying to reach, figure out what their preferred mechanism is. Because if you operate on their platform, I guarantee you that's going to be way more effective, right? And so for some, that may be a text. For others, that may be an hour-long phone call. And others, it's a combination or email or whatever. But you got to know that. Don't take that for granted. Don't assume. This is a big miss oftentimes is because I like to talk on the phone means everybody likes to talk on the phone, right? And that is not the situation at all. So we've got to meet them where they are. And again, for the maximum efficiency, figure out what they're into and adjust to that. I talk about building the perfect day and the perfect week. So again, it's bringing your aperture down to say, okay, if I want to accomplish the following goals and I break those into tactics, what needs to happen every day for me to make that happen? And at the end of the week, how will I know whether it was a good week or not? Right. So that's getting inside your calendar. And again, you can, through your CRM, you can learn what you can need to do, but then you can create your to-do list in that CRM. You can set your calendar reminders in that CRM. You may be able to automate if you have written communication. You could do that via the CRM and your email application. Those are the hooks that I'm talking about. And if you do that and you're diligent about that every day, so, do the hard stuff as early in the day as you can. As you're reaching out to the people you're communicating with, what's the best time to reach them? Got to know that. That's super helpful. But don't let days slip. We're all going to have days. Let me be super duper clear here. Everybody fails. It either fails at a task or has a bad day, or an unexpected emergency came up. Whatever that thing is, it's going to happen all the time. Just try to get back to catch up. Right? Don't let that slip and go, well, I'll start again from zero tomorrow. Try to dig out of that hole as best you can and as quickly as you can. If you manage your days and your weeks, your months, your quarters, and your years will be fantastic. You'll ascend to a new level of accomplishment. And again, I'm saying this because I want everybody that's listening to this to be jazzed about how this can help them feel better about the job they're doing, but understand the implications. It's that customer service. The people at the other end that you're touching are going to feel way better about the engagement. It's going to be so much richer, so much more impactful because of what you're doing. And they won't necessarily know that you're doing it. They're just going to feel like you are just wired tight. You got your act together. And that's what a beautiful feeling. And you care about them mostly, right? Like that's a big deal. So
I would encourage people go back into the show notes. There's a lot of points here that Matt was talking about, but to dial it back into us for discipleship, you have group leaders that you're working with, and they have people that they're working with, and you may have coaches or community leaders that are helping you with this. And what I love about this is you've got to set goals each week to say, not only how many of my leaders am I going to engage this week, because we've got to disciple them. The only way we can do that is relationally, but then learning the other components of which way do they engage the best? What day is the best way for them to engage on? And knowing those pieces is going to be important. Matt, anything else on that particular point, number 5, that you want to share?
I think we're good. I think you closed it up nicely. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, number 6. Matt, you've got continual improvement, and then you got adapt or die. I like this. I want to hear you unpack this and tell us how adapting or dying is all about improving discipleship.
I don't want to die.
Well, Derek and I are going to talk to you after the show about that one, Steve. So, no, great setup, Derek. And did I mention that salespeople have an affinity for the dramatic? So, yeah, we're a little dramatic with the adapt or die here. But it's a very true statement in context, which is you have to be relevant, and relevant is constantly changing. So, everything that is unfortunately, the world is shaping lots of things out there. There's new things, that we're dealing with every single year, and we have to stay current with that. And I think one of the gotchas or one of the guard against comments that I would make is when success can become a very limiting factor. When we have success, we immediately celebrate ourselves, the team, the effort, the thing, and then we say, hold still. Don't change a thing. And that's exactly the wrong mentality. Like, I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater, but what I am saying is what made you successful may need to look different in 6 months, definitely in a year, and certainly in 2 or 3 years' time. So I think you have to inspect, right, this continual improvement of, hey, if I hit my goals this week, this month, this quarter, and I get a lovely phone call from my good friend Steve Gladen, he's like, brother, your groups are rocking, like, love what I'm seeing, whatever. Fantastic. Can I do more? Like, that's just a simple question. That's a very personal question. Is there can I serve those people better than I am today? Can I serve a few more of them than I am today? And we all need to be our toughest critics on that. Like, push for a little bit more. We know who we're working for, and there's no ceiling on excellence, right? So go after that, and that's what we're saying, and adapt your approach. Secondly, sorry, Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, Matt, I was just going to say, I love that line you shared. I think you said what made you successful may not work in 6 months, Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses that I've seen in my experience in working for churches and just being a part of the church world, is a church will have some great success, right, in church planning or reaching this next growth level. And it's like they stop and don't think that they have to keep thinking outside of the box to close that back door. And then but it's the longer you're in it, the more blind you become to it, right? So it's almost like you need this outside help, but you can't get there. So I love what you're sharing here. Keep going. Sorry.
No, listen, good insertion there, and keep that going, because what you said. So one, you become static, but then as things shift and change, that success is not only maintaining, it's declining, and you become more desperate because you have not changed your thinking yet, right? So that your immediate reaction in that mode, which I've seen many a times, is you just you run more frantically. It becomes more manic, and you're just like, well, if I just do more repetitions, the exercise will deliver better results. And the answer is no, because it's moved. Like what has changed is changed, and you haven't caught on to that. Yeah. And so that's why you have to inspect and look. And look, if you can run an idea for 10 years and it works perfect for 10 years, great. All I'm saying is inspect it objectively. Like don't get caught up in your own success. If you don't need to change it and it's working brilliantly, great. But there'll be big bits of it that you actually have to change. And that's the big bit that you don't want to miss, is don't get lost in that and become, I'll say, less than relevant to the people that you're trying to reach.
Yeah, the church always talks about wanting the new wineskins. We love reading that scripture about new wineskins, but yet how often we always like to go back to the old wineskins. I'm thinking how many churches came out of COVID and didn't want to try anything new or try to figure out what would be that next wave of trying to grab people, and what are they looking for, and what is culture looking for. And so there's some interesting dynamics, and there's a lot of places where you can read that on sociological trends that are happening that can help you also set up your weekend services, but also understand how people want to connect in community. And if you haven't been looking at any of the articles on loneliness and the need for friendship, it's right down our alley. And, that's part of things. If you don't adapt to where society and culture is telling us what they're asking for, and start to get people into that community, it's going to hurt. So, okay, man, let me kind of bring us home on point number 7, soul food, bringing us down. So, Matt, we're both foodies. Derek's a foodie too. So, let's go eat after the show. But you're talking about nurturing relationships that will foster growth and improve impact. And obviously the impact we're looking for is discipleship. All 7 of these points, we're trying to say, how can you use technology to serve you to get to the discipleship goal that you want when you're engaging with people? But Matt, unpack this point for us.
Yeah, I'll give you a personal example. I've been blessed to have, I'll say, 3 of these people through 35 years in I'll say my day job in sales, that were just this gregarious leader. And I don't mean this in a false bravado sort of way, hey, look at me, it's all about me way. I mean, they if you said, what makes that person, that leader great? Yeah. Everybody would answer, I love hearing them speak. I feel taller when they're in the room. I'm better at just breathing when they're around. You know what I mean? Like, I'm being funny, but it's like, man, the world is just always sunny and 75 when I'm hanging with those people. And we all have the capability of doing that. Our styles are all different. And this is another thing, and I'm going to pick on the sales guys again here for a second as a parting shot, is, I think if you went typical stereotype sales, loud, winking, finger popping, flashy dresser, flashy car driving, that's sales, right? That's what we all kind of believe is sales. And somebody put that icon in our heads a long time ago, and that's why majority of the world doesn't want to be a salesperson. So, an awful lot of the best salespeople are highly introverted, believe it or not. Like, they are not extroverts; they're just not. But they are problem solvers. They're communicators, they're doers, right? Yeah. And so I say that to the listeners today, because I don't care what your aptitude for being extroverted or introverted or somewhere in between. You have gifts that you do better than anybody else. That's what I'm saying, is like, look within there and bring that to the people that you're servicing. You don't be like anybody else. Be you. Be you, do your thing, but bring your uniqueness to that conversation, and do it with the mindfulness of, we'll go back to the structure and the data and the personalization. Is like, how can I make that person on the other end of the phone feel like those sales leaders made me feel that I was describing? Like, why am I taller, better, feel more optimistic about the day, want to dive into the word, want to reach out to my group? Why do I want to hang up from this conversation, this text exchange, and feel different? That's, I'll say, our collective job, bringing it back to the small group and what we're anchoring on. So we leverage that data, we leverage those insights, we personalize the communication. But again, we've got to draw from that, and this is, I'll call this the delivery, right? Like we have to deliver that, and I think sometimes we're either not thoughtful about it, sometimes we're lazy about it, and that seems like a lot of work. It really isn't. It's a lot of work if I want to be Derek, because he's way smarter and I have no idea how to push all the buttons he's pushing and all that stuff, right? Like, can't do it. But if I'm me, and I bring that to the show, then people get that. And then, and by the way, it's not a competition. Like, they're like, man, I love hanging with all of you guys, right? And then we get this broader community, the way God intended it to be, not to, thump the Bible too hard here, but like, that's just like, that's what we're bringing together. But that leaves a memorable impression. So step back from everything that we've said, and I'll kind of wind this down. If you guys have questions, you can throw them at me. But it's, look, if I get my head in the right space before I engage, and then I'm really efficient at what I use, and I don't lose the fingerprints that I'm putting on people, and I connect with them in the way that they want me to, and the frequency and the timing that they want me to. And when I engage with them, I try to help them through a structured approach achieve their goals for their group, for their community, for their church. My gosh, I mean, that can't be anything other than a flourishing vessel. Like, that's where the goodness is. And so I know we badge this as CRM. CRM is just kind of the main thread through this tapestry, but all this other goodness, is everybody that's listening to us right now. So this is just a tool to help organize that and get the efficiency, the productivity into your day. And I hope from a sales guy of many years, this was insightful and gave you a few new ideas and maybe a new approach on how to tackle small groups and doing the good work and hanging with my friends Steve and Derek. Appreciate you guys, and thanks for having me on today.
Well, love it, but I'm not going to let you off too quick, because you said you had one other thing that was in the notes that I don't want to lose, because I think it's valuable for each one of us, because we're all about the people business. We're engaging people all the time. You had a part right there, Matt. I can't remember if it was in the show notes or if it was before we were talking before the show. But it was about grading yourself. Can you just give a little bit about that? Because every one of us talk to people, and then Derek can bring us home. But just because we're always talking to people, what are you talking about grading yourself?
Yeah, I'll bring the word up again. The toxic word, discipline. It's foreign in the world today, but I'll say what served me extraordinarily well is being my own toughest critic. Not beat myself up for I'll say sit around in a corner in a dark room, self-loathing. That's not what I mean. I just mean nobody knows the job and what I'm putting forward better than I do, and I don't think I've ever gone through an evaluation with a supervisor of mine where my self-eval was not lower than what my boss thought I was doing.
Yeah.
Right. So I do something simple. Here's an idea. This is like, everybody has this. I don't care if this is a legal pad or I actually use like a doc, right? Just a typical Word doc. But for each of my leaders, and I do it for myself, I try to take somewhere between, there's no magic number here, but I'll say 6 to 9 important elements of the job. And oftentimes in a sales community, it's kind of like, hey, if you put up the number, if you sold what you needed to sell, that's it. We don't want to talk about that. And I'm actually approaching it from the opposite angle. I'm like, the goals are definitely super important. Like, there's no getting away from that. But the reason we're doing the scorecard, I call it a leadership scorecard. It's an A through F system, right? Old school, right? A, you get 4 points. F, you get, nothing. And you build the categories of what excellent would look like for that job. And then you give yourself and you give, your downline, if you're a leader, you score them. And then you have a conversation quarterly and go, hey, here's how the last 90 days looked. And the idea here is that you understand where you did well. Of course, you understand where you need improvement. You reset those expectations of what was in control, what was out of control. right? What you can adjust for. And then I have a comment section at the end that just kind of goes over that and just says, hey, and the notes are really about praising what's good, but digging into the course corrections we're going to make in the next 90 days. So we do that. I think the world doesn't want accountability and the world doesn't want discipline. And that's why I bring it up a little tongue in cheek, but it's super true. And we all know that. Yeah. But a nautical example I'll give you is if you've been on a boat for longer than 10 minutes and it was untied from the dock, I would suggest to you that it was off course most of the time, right? Yeah. So the idea here is that you catch course correction when it's 2 to 3 degrees off. You don't catch it when it's 90 degrees off. So by doing these scorecards, evaluating yourself and asking for your boss's feedback, evaluating your downline and reviewing it with your downline and making sure you're having just a check-in conversations, as we call them, with your leadership scorecard, you can course correct in small increments. That means those confrontational conversations a lot of us don't like to have, they're much easier because they're not that big. If you let them go to 90 degrees or 180 degrees off course, back to the nautical example, they're hard conversations. They're like, hey, Steve, remember how you were supposed to show up for work in January? Well, it's July 18th and you're still not here, man. Like, they're like, no. You guys get it. So the longer the distance between that, and you have to be honest. Here's the last point I'd make here is, oftentimes people say, are you getting feedback? And I'll say something as silly as, yeah, I ran into Derek at the Starbucks this morning. I asked him how I was doing. He's like, bro, great. You nailed it. I'm like, that's terrible. That is Derek wanting to drink his coffee and get me out of his face as fast as possible. And he doesn't want to hurt my feelings, even if it was terrible. And especially if it was terrible. That is not, but we do that all the time. We do that. That is probably 90% of the way people, quote unquote, ask for feedback. Yeah. We have to get people around us in advance. So when we build our plan, think about the people as you build your plan that can give you, as best as possible, 360-degree input on how you're doing. The people you serve, how am I doing? Your boss, how am I doing? People that do the same job as you, right? How am I doing? How do I compare to like what you see and what you feel? And I want you to be critical. Like if you see something good, I want you to call it out, but I don't want you to be hesitant to say that there's a splinter in my eye, right? Like let's get to that bit. And when you do that, then you can come back to them every 90 days, every 6 months and ask for that and do it in advance. Give them a week's notice to pull that together. Don't ask them on the spot. Don't ask them at the Starbucks or the coffee pot because you're just going to get a dismissive answer that's not accurate, well thought out. And therefore it's actually the worst of all scenarios because you're going to feel like you got feedback you actually did. So
a good nugget for us all is that a good question to ask is, what is your scorecard? So when you're trying to engage with group leaders, when you're trying to engage with the people who are helping you out with your community leaders and stuff like that, what needs to be on your scorecard? And I sure hope there's a good balance on the scorecard between the things you want and the relational pieces that you're injecting into them and learning from them about who they are. And so it's a good balance. So, Derek, any questions or you want to bring us home?
No, that was amazing insight, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us today and for just sharing all this wealth of knowledge and experience that you have. And I really think I've really grown from this talk hearing you, and I know our listeners will as well. So, Steve and I say thanks again for joining us.
Yep.
And to everybody listening, thank you for tuning in to another episode of SG Squared. And our prayers that this episode encourages you and inspires you to lead better small groups, healthier small groups. And until next time, have a great summer.
Thank you for listening to Steve Gladen on Small Groups. If you like what you've heard, make sure you subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. If you want to learn more, make sure you check out smallgroupnetwork.com for more resources.